In a small mining town in County Durham, a kettle came to a boil. A woman lifted it, poured the water into a teapot, added the leaves, and waited. To anyone passing the window, it looked like nothing at all: a wife tending a sick husband, a mother comforting a feverish child. But in this kitchen, the tea carried a second ingredient, one with no color, no smell, and almost no taste, once dissolved in something hot and bitter. By the time the town understood what was happening behind that door, 21 people who had loved, trusted, or simply lived beside this woman would be dead. Her name was Mary Ann Cotton, and history would remember her as Britain's first documented female serial killer. She was born Mary Ann Robson in 1832 in the pit village of Low Morsley, the daughter of a miner who fell to his death down a shaft when she was 8. Her mother remarried quickly, out of necessity rather than affection, and Mary Ann grew up believing that survival, not sentiment, governed the world. She trained briefly as a nurse, learning the sickroom's quiet arithmetic, how a body weakens, and how illness could be measured out. In 1852 she married her first husband, William Mowbray. Over the years that followed, a grim pattern repeated itself: children born, children dying, small insurance policies taken out on their short lives, and small payouts collected once they were gone. Doctors wrote gastric fever and stomach complaint on the certificates, the only language a century without forensic toxicology could offer. In 1865, Mowbray himself died suddenly of an intestinal disorder. Mary Ann collected £35, nearly a year's wages, and did not stay a widow for long. Husband followed husband. George Ward died within 14 months of typhoid and intestinal problems. She kept house for a colliery manager, James Robinson, until he grew suspicious of the deaths trailing her and threw her out. She married Frederick Cotton in 1870, likely while still legally married to another man. By the time she settled in West Auckland with Cotton's surviving son, she had buried 3 husbands, a lover, her own mother, and somewhere between 10 and 11 children and stepchildren. Each death, alone, fit neatly into the era's expectations of tragedy. Together, no one was adding them up. The weapon in the teapot was arsenic trioxide, cheap, legal, sold openly as vermin killer. Dissolved in hot tea, it was nearly undetectable to taste or smell. Inside the body, it bound to enzymes the cells needed to convert food into energy, poisoning the very engine that kept tissue alive. The gut inflamed and bled. Blood pressure collapsed. Nerves lost their insulation, producing the numbness and creeping weakness so easily mistaken for ordinary illness. Administered slowly, in small doses over days, it produced exactly the symptoms Victorian doctors already expected from gastric fever, cramping, vomiting, exhaustion, death. A reliable chemical test existed, the Marsh test, but it was rarely used on poor mining families whose deaths were too common to investigate. By 1872, Mary Ann had her sights on a new prospect, a respectable excise officer, but her stepson, 7-year-old Charles Edward Cotton, stood in her way. When a parish official refused to take the boy into the workhouse unless she went with him, she turned to a neighbor in fury. "He's a stumbling block in my way," she said, "and he'll go like all the rest of the Cotton family." 9 days later, the boy was dead. But this time, someone hesitated. Dr. William Kilburn had examined Charles shortly before his death and found nothing seriously wrong with him. When the boy died so suddenly afterward, Kilburn refused to sign the certificate without an inquest. "I will not certify this as natural," he is recorded to have insisted, and he preserved samples from the child's stomach for testing. That single act of doubt broke 20 years of control. Newspapers seized on the story. A more rigorous chemical test, the Reinsch test, confirmed significant arsenic in Charles's remains. Investigators began exhuming bodies, husbands, children, the lover Joseph Nattrass, and found the same poison again and again. The pattern the town had explained away as misfortune was, under a microscope, revealed as a signature. Mary Ann Cotton was arrested that July, and for the first time in her adult life, control belonged to someone else. Her trial opened at Durham Crown Court in March 1873, the courtroom packed with spectators who had followed the case in every newspaper in the region. Heavily pregnant, she sat through days of testimony, the insurance clerks describing policy after policy taken out on small lives, the parish overseer recounting her threat against Charles, and finally the chemist who confirmed the arsenic in the boy's organs. Her defense argued that the poison might have leached from the era's notoriously toxic green wallpaper dye, a real and widely feared hazard of the time, and tried to cast doubt on a case built from exhumed graves. The jury was not persuaded. After deliberating less than an hour, they returned a single word: guilty. On March 24, 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was hanged at Durham County Jail. The executioner misjudged the drop, and witnesses described her slow, agonized death by strangulation rather than a swift break of the neck. Within months, children in the region were chanting a rhyme that would outlive every one of her victims. Mary Ann Cotton, she's dead and she's rotten. She lies in her bed with her eyes wide open. Sing, sing, oh what can I sing? Mary Ann Cotton is tied up with string. She was convicted of only one murder, but history has connected her to as many as 21 deaths, more, by some counts, than Jack the Ripper would claim 5 years later in Whitechapel. She needed no knife, no gun, only patience, and a society unwilling to imagine a grieving mother as a murderer. It took 20 years and one doctor's stubborn refusal to sign a piece of paper before anyone thought to ask the question that unraveled it all: what if this was never bad luck at all? Evil, this case still insists, rarely announces itself. It waits inside the ordinary, a cup of tea, a sickly child, a widow's grief, for as long as everyone around it is too certain to look twice.